Okay, thank you for everyone who's joining. We're going to give it about 2 minutes before we start to allow attendees to join in on the meeting. We're going to turn it to a slide to provide contact information while we're waiting. So take a look at our contact information and how to sign up for alerts while we're waiting. So we'll start in about 2 minutes. All right. People will be coming in, and that's okay. We're going to get started. So welcome everyone to CTA's Red Purple Bypass project virtual public meeting. So this is our first virtual public meeting that the CTA RPM project has had. So we're super excited about that opportunity. And of course, considering the current situation that the world and our city is going through, this is part of what we're doing to try and stay engaged with the community as much as possible. So we're going to be giving updates on the status of the construction project and relay information about the work and its upcoming projects and impacts. So thanks again for being here. My name is Jesse Thomas. I work in community outreach for the RPM project, and I'll be moderating this meeting. So before we get started, I'm going to explain a little bit about how the virtual meeting will work. As you can see, we have live sign language interpretation being provided. So thank you to our interpreters there. This meeting is also being recorded. And once we have the recording, we will provide translations in Spanish, Chinese, and Vietnamese that will be posted on our website. So we will be having a presentation from some of our speakers in CTA and then having a Q&A session. If at any time you have a question throughout the presentation, you're welcome to send them in. So you click a small button on in your Zoom window that says Q&A, and you can type in your question by clicking there, and then we will be going through all of those questions that we can in about a 15-minute time period for Q&A. If we didn't get to all of the questions that were asked, that's okay. We will be posting those on the website in about a week or so, making sure that we hit all of the questions that were asked, whether people asked when registering and put in a question there or during our live meeting. So that is the plan for our presentation. I also want to give a special welcome to Alderman Tunney of the 44th Ward and some members of the staff that are here with us. I believe, Alderman, I can't quite see you, but if you'd like to say hello, we welcome you to do that. Okay. Not coming through, that's all right. But we really appreciate the support from the 44th Ward and Alderman Tunney, and we will go on to looking at the agenda. So, great, so here's our agenda for the meeting. We're going to be hearing from Chris Buchel. He is the RPM project executive for the project. He'll be talking a little bit about the community-focused approach that we have in this project. Next, we'll hear from Steve Hands, RPM senior manager. He'll be talking about construction progress and impacts that are associated with this project. Lastly, we'll hear from Tammy Chase. She is the RPM Director of Communications. She'll be talking about the Open for Business program that is part of this project. So that is our agenda, and afterwards we'll be going over the Q&A like I explained previously. So we'll go right into the presentation, and I will turn it over to Chris Buchel.
Oh, thank you very much, Jesse. Just wanted to thank everyone for attending. This is our first virtual meeting. Like most of you, our world has been impacted by COVID. We've continued to move the project forward, but in many cases through video conferences. So I'm going to kind of hopefully avoid the occurrence of a dog barking or a child walking through the background by pre-jinxing myself, but we've all had it happen. So as we provide the updates, we'll do the best we can to overcome those challenges. If we go to the next slide, please. RPM Phase 1. So RPM is a large project to reconstruct the oldest parts of the Red Line. We've done a bunch of work already on the Red Line. We reconstructed the tracks on the Dan Ryan. We've built a new station at 95th Street, but now we're returning to one of the oldest pieces of infrastructure we have and rebuilding that. We would have loved to have done it in one big chunk. I think it would have created a lot of challenges. So we're really just doing the first piece of it, RPM Phase 1. And it's two primary pieces, which is a bridge and 4 stations from Lawrence to Bryn Mawr, and then the red-purple bypass, which will be the focus of tonight's meeting. Next slide, please. So just a map. Most of you folks have seen this already. You understand what it is. Besides those two elements and the stuff that goes around them, the bypass obviously comes with some additional replacement of the elevated structure. And in addition to that and the work I talked about in Lawrence to Bryn Mawr, it's also a new signaling system, which a lot of you will never see, except it will keep your trains safer and faster, and otherwise be a critical part of modernizing the service into the future. Next, please. So outreach, design, and construction. Outreach has started, it started really 10 years ago and continued through public meetings where we were looking for the neighborhood's vision, how the neighborhood was anticipating reacting to new stations and what was important in those. And it continued through a National Environmental Policy Act, a NEPA study, and finally a full funding grant agreement. So the outreach has gone on for a long time. In the short term, it's really reaching out to businesses, reaching out to communities, providing the best information we can on construction. Design, I talked a little bit about COVID. Design in this project is occurring all over North America. We have used video conferencing instead of people traveling to the city, which has some advantages and disadvantages, but we've been able to keep it going. In terms of public face design, we haven't just considered the structural weights and the train and how many times the train has to go over and the various forces associated with that. We've also thought about the community as we've been building these bridges. What kind of rooms and spaces, public spaces, are created under our bridges and around it. So we have tried to give that consideration and provide fewer columns, better sight lines with those columns, safer for cars and pedestrians going through, as well as new lighting. So various amenities that you would expect to see in your city, we've tried to deliver on those as well. Construction, we are building a very big project here, and it is right in the middle of your neighborhood. And that said, though, we've tried to take into consideration and limited the contractor in terms of what they could take for roadways, closing those roadways. They can't close all of them at once. We work very closely with the aldermen to make sure that you can get to your homes, and where you can't, you have suitable alternative service. We make sure that when we close an alley, that you have garbage pickup. So we have considered the impacts of that construction, not just to keep it on schedule and on budget, but also to minimize the impacts to the community and the riding public. Next slide, please. So this is just a couple of slides to show kind of that we've delivered on some of the promises we made in earlier renderings. Those of you that are in the neighborhood of course, see what the columns look like. You'll understand there's a bridge that will be ultimately on top of that. That's really the bypass. But just comparing those to what we showed earlier, we're trying to deliver on those promises. Next. Similar issue here. Just trying to compare it to earlier visions. You see a little bit of refinement one to the other, but fundamentally we're endeavoring to deliver on earlier promises. Next slide, please. I talked about fewer columns. I talked about lighting, better sight lines. All of these are improvements that we considered in a room like this. And instead of just having tracks under there, just having tracks and nothing under there, we tried to improve the lighting and to add features where we could, where it made sense to, both for the community as well as for the structure we were building. Next, please. So I'm pleased to say we did an animation a couple of years ago. It was a very preliminary design. Ultimately, the contractor has done a ton of hard work to take it to the next level, and I'm sort of pleased to show it today. I'll try to narrate it, but it should be pretty clear to everyone that I'm not much of a talking head, so I'll do my best. But if we could start the animation now, that would be great. All right, so you've got an overview here of the bypass. Then to the right of the bypass is that train, the Brown Line train continues northbound. You can see that we're also reconstructing the other tracks. Again, you'll notice that you don't see through these tracks. There's a closed deck. So you've got a brown line going over the top and red lines going underneath it. And that's an important thing. That wouldn't be happening right now. Right now, the brown line or the red line train would have to stop. You don't see stoplights in the middle of the Dan Ryan Expressway. You shouldn't see stoplights or signals in the middle of a busy modern transit system. So that's really the reason behind that bypass. Another view of the same. This is a northbound Brown Line train coming right to the side of our tower. That's where various rail people work and control the trains moving through this junction. Red line going underneath it. Again, red line not stopping, just continuing to go. These are really the basics of the structural improvements that we're doing. You'll notice sound walls. You'll notice that it's a closed bridge structure, so the noise doesn't punch through and go down nearly as much as it does today. I talked a little bit in design about public spaces and rooms. So this is a little bit more of an illustration of how these rooms worked for us, where we emphasized the sculptural aspects of these columns, as well as provided additional lighting and fencing, other things to kind of more delineate that space as either a neighborhood space or, in the case of Clark here, more of a commercial space on a larger scale. And then, moving to a room that's a little bit of both at Clark and Roscoe, there with the vision over the top of it. The bypass is about that bridge, that bypass. It's also about constructing the bridge underneath it, which really aids in the throughput of all the tracks. Another room, again, a little closer at Sheffield. A little more of a neighborhood space. I'll remind folks that the existing tracks, while we'll use them less, they don't see as much traffic, and they get renovated. They get painted, and they get brought into a state of good repair. The Newport room, this is really the 4-track section of the red and purple line that we're replacing. And you can see the increased lighting, the better sight lines, the fencing, and some of the other amenities that we endeavored to think about in more of a neighborhood space. Next, please. Oh, it's the end. All right. Well, with that, thank you very much, Jesse. Thank you guys for coming. I'm going to turn it over to Jesse, who will introduce our next speaker.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, I've seen that animation a few times now, and I still get the chills, so I'm very excited about it. So next up, we're going to be hearing about construction progress and associated impacts. I will turn it over to Steve.
Thank you, Jesse. I'm excited to be here today to talk to you. This is a new experience for me. I do miss the crowds at our public meetings, but I'm happy to have you all here on this new format. Next slide, please. So the first piece that I want to touch on is our advanced utility relocation. We're happy to say that we're almost complete here in the bypass area for the utility relocation, about 95% complete, and we are anticipating completion this fall of 2020. You will continue to see some work in the area, some crews working along Clark Street, AT&T crews, and so obviously you'll see that, and we'll continue to receive updates if you're on our list for receiving construction alerts. But we're really excited that we're coming near the end of this utility relocation effort, and we thank you for bearing with us over this time. Next slide, please. So a little bit about the Roscoe Newport Alley, where there's quite a bit of construction has happened over the last few months. This is where the bypass comes in and ties into the existing brown line on the west side of the bypass structure. So for the bypass structure itself, we're happy to report that the micropile foundations for that structure is now 100% complete. The next steps for the bypass structure will be continuing to work in the area by pouring new concrete pedestals at the base of the new columns, setting the steel columns and beams. And then the following effort will be to put the track on top of those beams. In addition to the bypass structure in this alley, you can see here the existing brown line track structure. And currently we are working on the rehabilitation aspects of that. So we are working on some of the improvements to the steel structure, shoring those existing columns, preparing for new foundations, additional micropile foundations to replace the 120-year-old, well, 113-year-old foundations out there. New concrete pedestals, so the columns will be cut down, and new concrete pedestals will be added at the base of those columns. And then the entire steel structure will be rehabilitated, repaired, and repainted. We're happy that we were able to open up the alley. It's currently open and will be open through July 12th. And then we'll continue to work with Walsh Floor, our contractor, to identify future opportunities to open up the alley or provide access to garages. Next slide, please. The other aspect, which Chris pointed out quite a bit in his presentation and the animation, is the construction of the bypass columns to support the bypass structure between Belmont and Roscoe. This is the main spans of the bypass, and you can see the curvilinear detailing of this column shape that we were really excited to bring to the community, and we hope you enjoy it. We think it turned out quite nice. Next slide, please. Here are those columns marching from the existing Belmont Station as they increase in height gradually to support that bypass structure, rising up to a level that's about a 4-story building. Now that they're in the community there, you see the highest columns are in place. You have a sense of what it looks like in the surrounding community, and you can see pretty clearly that while they are taller than the existing structures, they are within the same height as a lot of other buildings in the neighborhood, and we're really excited to see how they turned out. Next slide, please. Once all the bypass columns are complete, which is we're looking at the end of this month here for those to be complete, the next aspect will be to set the steel beams. And you can see an image here from the Wilson Station project, which Chris noted earlier as well, where those steel beams are being set to support the track structure above. You can see the type of equipment here on the picture for those steel beam setting, a large crane, and the workers associated with to set those beams. This work is expected to start this fall. And as you can see from the impacts here, where the work is being conducted, you will continue to see some alley closures where those beams are being set, as well as street closures at School, Sheffield, and Roscoe, where the bypass structure crosses. Next slide, please. In addition to the bypass structure, we'll also be working on a temporary track structure this fall. And the temporary track is necessary for us to continue to operate Brown Line southbound service while we reconstruct the red and purple line tracks adjacent. This work is expected to start in the fall, and the impacts are really localized to those individuals along Sheffield between Belmont and Roscoe Street on the east side of Sheffield, those businesses and residences. Because the temp track has to be located right above the alley, there will be alley closures, as well as closures at School Street where the temp track crosses. However, we'll our contractor will continue to provide garbage service and deliveries to those adjacent properties during those closures. Next slide, please. This is a drawing from the designer for the temporary track. So we call it temporary, but it's still a very robust structure to support the existing Brown Line track service. It will be built over the alley, and you can see the drive aisle is between those two columns, but it will be wide enough to accommodate vehicles to traverse. We've worked with the Chicago Department of Transportation to make sure that this design will function well. It provides at least 12 feet between those concrete pedestals at the base of the columns. And you can see it's kind of right over the alley between the existing CTA tracks to the east and the property lines, the properties to the west. Next slide. As noted, once the bypass structure and the temporary track are in place, we'll be able to work on the north, red, and purple lines between Belmont and Newport on the north. So this is actually a full replacement of those 4 tracks. We're going to have to build the structure in halves, so 2 tracks at a time, so that we can continue to run red and purple line service while we're rebuilding the other tracks. The tracks will be realigned to allow us to run faster service through the area and more efficiently, as well as improving customer comfort on the rail, on the trains. And they will include sound walls and a concrete deck above the beams supporting them. It will be a mix of concrete beams as well as steel beams to support that track structure. Next slide. You saw this rendering earlier during the video. This again is the Newport area. This shows that 4-track section of the red and purple lines as they cross over Newport Avenue. This is just east of Clark Street. And you'll see the structure here with the closed deck, the sound barrier, and some of the lighting and detailing that we've looked at on the columns to really improve the aesthetic approach of this structure as it wends its way through the neighborhood. And with that, I'll turn it over to Jesse, who's going to introduce our next speaker.
Thanks, Steve, for taking through a lot of detail on upcoming work. So I'm going to pass it now to Tammy, who's going to take us through our Open for Business program for the project. Tammy?
Hi, thank you. Thank you, Jesse. As you guys have heard from Steve and from Chris, the first and foremost, this project is about rebuilding a 100-year-old structure, providing a much better red and purple line commute experience than we're able to on century-old structure. But a big portion of support the businesses, the hundreds of businesses that exist literally in the shadows or within blocks of the Red Line in the Lakeview neighborhood, as well as up north between Lawrence and Bryn Mawr. Contributing to that is the fact that this is a project that goes through 2025. That's a long time for a CTA project. We believe that it is important. It is our duty, is our responsibility as an agency to support the businesses. So we have been out in the community for years. Many of you know our faces. We're talking to chambers, talking to aldermen and staff, we're talking to local businesses, finding out what are your concerns, what are you worried about, what do you need help with to survive and thrive during construction and beyond. So we've gotten a lot of great feedback, and so all of that is really going to is factoring into the Open for Business campaign that we are currently building right now. So next slide, please. Before I go into the details of the Open for Business program, I do want to mention, of course, COVID-19 is really hurting a lot of the businesses around the city and certainly in our community. And so that has factored into how we calibrate promoting businesses, to whom we promote them, bringing people into the community in a meaningful and thoughtful way. So we know that now more than ever that we play an important role in supporting our businesses. So I don't have to tell the folks that live in this community how great your community is, and part of the unique character is the small businesses, the great restaurants, the great shops, etc., that exist here. So we have been working with, like I said, the chambers, the local aldermen, local businesses, to put together a campaign that will have multiple aspects to it. That will include signage at our stations, signage at available spaces throughout the community and beyond the community. It will also include digital targeted advertising to reach people on their phones, since we all spend a lot of time with our faces in phones. And also, we're really excited to build what we're referring to as a web portal. But what that really is just a dedicated website that we can promote through social media, through our signage, that is all about the community, is built with the community. It is about the community, is for the community. Events that are coming up, promoting individual restaurants, promoting what's located between Roscoe, Clark, and Belmont, and worth visiting to attract people that are, remind people in the community, hey, these businesses are still open, but also trying to get people from outside of the community to come and patronize. So we're refining aspects of this plan. We have had a lot of conversations with the community about this, and we'll be coming back out with that later this year. The next major step, which we're really excited about, is we've built a program where we can register businesses to participate in the Open for Business program. That means it's a free program, and that means that they can be featured on our web portal, be featured on social media, be featured in signage, be promoted on digital advertising on the phone. So this is beyond what CTA has done in the past for promoting small businesses, and we're really excited to do that. So stay tuned. We will be providing you with more information as we move forward through this year. And so with that, I will turn this back to Jesse.
Thanks, Tammy. Personally, I have been going to businesses in the area since I was a teenager, and so I'm really excited that our project is doing what it can to help them out during this time. Well, we are done with our presentation portion of the meeting, and we're going to move on to our question and answers. So I'm going to ask, we're going to broaden the panel of who will be answering questions. So those who are on the panel, let's put videos on. I see you're doing that. I'll introduce two new people who will be joining for the panel. First is Jeff Wilson. He's the Director of Government and Community Relations for the RPM project. And the second is Kristen DeWitt. She is on the Walsh Floor Design Build team, the contractor for the project, and she is a project manager. So it looks like we can see everyone. Okay, so like I mentioned before, we'll be talking with our questions and answers for 15 minutes. And we've been collecting the questions we received in registration, and then also the questions that we have been that have been coming in during the presentation. So I will go to the first question. This first one, we've got a lot of people asking this. I will send this one to Chris to answer. The question is, when will the project end, and has COVID impacted the schedule for completion?
We started with an easy one. Well, the project overall is scheduled to end in 2025. People will have all kinds of questions about where the work in their neighborhood is going to end, and the best place to get information on that is through signing up for the various alerts that we put out. Construction for us and those impacts, usually we look, maybe 5 to 6 weeks ahead for very specific impacts. Broader ones start much earlier than that. On budget and on schedule. So I would characterize this project as on budget and tight to schedule. And I would say the tightness of the schedule is due to a large degree to the impacts of COVID. While we've been able to transition pretty seamlessly in design from working in an office with people flying in from all over North America to contribute, it has been a little bit of a challenge to be able to work together on a very complex design. Generally, video conferencing and other elements have really helped us out a lot, but there have been impacts there. As we go on to the workforce, the contractor has done an exceptional job keeping their workforce safe, working to take their temperatures before they start work, keeping them socially distanced where possible, spreading out crews as necessary. But it has been a difficult effort to keep this going and to keep it going with everyone's safety in mind. The workers predominantly, but also the community. But I still, at the end of the day, would characterize the project as on budget and tight to schedule. So thank you for that question, though.
Thanks, Chris. Okay, the next question. We're also getting a lot of people asking this question. When will the Valtravers building be moved, the building on Newport? And will this impact the residential parking? Steve, can I pass that to you?
Sure. So the Valtravers building, we're very excited that we are continuing to make progress on the planning efforts to move that building and the design efforts to move that building in the Newport Historic District. So that building, if you aren't aware, is on Newport Avenue. It's 947 West Newport, and it's just east of Clark Street. So the plan is to move that building approximately 29 feet further to the west, out of the way of the realigned track structure. That actual building move would take place in 2021. And with regard to parking, CTA and the contractor will continue to work on finding alternative parking locations for individuals that have impacted properties, even if it's not on that specific lot where the building's being moved.
All right, thanks, Steve. Next question. This is about specific to construction, so I'll ask Kristen to answer this one. Will there be overnight work in the RPB area?
We'll be starting some night work coming up in August. It'll be a couple of nights, and it's going to be when the Brown Line train is not operating. So it's about that 2.5 hour window. It'll be at track level. It's for some signals and platform work, and that's to prepare us for the work that's going to be starting in October, November. We'll be working weekends, and there will be some night work associated with that. Likely we'll keep the work to the day as much as we can, but there will be people out around the evenings on those weekends.
Okay. Our next question, this will be for Steve as well. Can you publish a high-level schedule for the completion of the project?
So there is a schedule on our website that identifies high-level dates for the project, both the Red Purple Bypass area and the Lawrence to Bryn Mawr area. So you should be able to view that from our website. If you have trouble accessing it, please contact us at the rpm@transitchicago.com email address, and we'll make sure that you get you to that link.
Okay. Steve, I'm going to have you do the next one as well. Is TIF money being used for this work? If so, how much?
So there is a TIF, a tax increment financing district was set up specifically for this project under Illinois state legislature that allows for TIF projects to be created to support transit improvement projects. It's supporting about 1/3 of the project in total. And again, it's only going towards the transit improvement projects, public service here in Chicago to bring this project forward. That TIF was necessary for us to leverage our local sources in order to bring over $1 billion of federal money to this project from a competitive grant program that otherwise wouldn't have been available to the region and to Chicago without us being able to bring some local sources, including the TIF, to bear.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Next question I will pass to Kristen. It's about construction timelines. When will the work in the alley between Newport and Roscoe be finished?
Multi-pronged answer. The work that we're doing right now with the substructure rehab and the pedestals there, we should be finishing up late fall, near the end of the year here. That will segue into the superstructure erection in the area. I believe that's a few months worth of work. And then after that, we'll be doing our track and signals and systems to tie in the flyover. And I believe that the flyover is flyover tie-in and to be operational is early Q3 next year, somewhere in that area. I'm not exactly sure, but after that, there will be additional work in the alley, but I do believe, or back in the Newport Roscoe area, but I do believe that that work is, there will be a break in time before that work starts up again. And then it will be ongoing throughout the rest of the project.
Okay, thanks, Kristen. Next question, it's on aesthetics. We talked a little bit about that, but a little more detail is being asked for here. I'll pass this to Steve. What does the plan What is planned to make the flyover an aesthetically pleasing structure? Will there be opportunities for mosaics and murals?
So as we noted, we did take a hard look at the design early on, making sure that the columns themselves became an asset to the community, where you see that shape and style really brings a change to what a standard cylindrical column would look like. In addition, we've looked at lighting options under the bypass structure as it crosses streets, and you saw some of the patterns that you would see there. But a lot of what we're doing with the bypass to improve the aesthetic is going to happen more at the pedestrian level, at the person level. And that's an area that we're going to continue to work with the community on moving forward. We're not quite there yet, but you saw some of the initial concepts with the lighting at Clark Street, how those spaces really enhance the community. We are looking at opportunities to bring a little bit more tactile nature to it at the pedestrian level, but our focus is really to make sure that the pedestrian scale of the project is enhanced in these rooms that are created, as Chris noted. Thank you for the question, Jesse.
Okay. Next one I have down. How will the flyover, oh, I'm sorry, I'll pass this to you, Chris. How will the flyover and closed deck structures operate when we get snow and ice? Where will rain and snow be directed? Having a hard time hearing you, Chris.
Better now?
There you go.
Yeah. So like any bridge, there's a drainage system. So instead of just as it was before with, just sort of steel beams and the ties on top of it, in this case, there is a drainage system that collects that and puts it into actually kind of a holding area, and then ultimately integrates it into the drainage system for the city of Chicago overall. But the bypass itself is not completely closed deck. At some point it transitions to an open deck, although there will be some decking at the end of the day underneath that structure. It won't be quite the same structure. It is focused mostly on mitigating noise in that area. It too will collect whatever water or snow that comes down through there, and it will ultimately turn into water, and it will make its way into the city's stormwater system. So it is pretty typical of bridges that are built more for highways in that regard. In terms of noise, there's a huge difference between a bridge that has a closure on the bottom of it and one that's open. So the neighborhood will generally see improved noise performance under the current levels of service.
All right.
Does that answer the question? Snow is handled incrementally by a plow on the front of the trains. They, in many cases, are their own best remover of snow going forward. They have kind of a modern day cow catcher on the front that pushes that snow off, and each individual train acts as a piece of snow fighting equipment.
Great, thank you. I can run a train over by my sidewalk so I don't have to shovel. Okay, the next question. This one I will pass to Jeff. It's about parking. Will alternate parking lots ever change? How will we be informed about changes?
So thank you, Jesse. We're working very closely with Walsh Floor to identify new parking when we need to have alternative parking, specifically throughout the rest of this project. So we work very closely with both the community and with Walsh Floor to identify alternative parking. And once we make that available, we go out to the community and tell them what those options are.
Okay. Next question. This is for Tammy. It's about Open for Business. What is the best way to learn more about the Open for Business program?
Apologies, I had to unmute first. We do have some information on our website. It's transitchicago.com/RPM open for business. So there's some information, but the information that I talked about tonight will be forthcoming. So take a look at what we've got and look for updates coming soon.
Okay, great. We have time for a few more questions. This next one I have, I will send to Kristen. How long will the alley be closed again starting July 13th?
We are planning for extended closures and opening up intermittently. We are targeting getting the alleys open around all major holidays. And then as we go, we'll be trying to open it up for a few weeks at a time where available. And I don't know when that's going to be at this time.
Great, and that was in reference to the Newport Roscoe alley, right?
Correct.
All right, the next question. What will be done to protect the columns from graffiti? I'll send that to you, Steve.
Sure, the part of it is the design aspect in areas where we can, we're protecting them with fencing, but also all of the columns will receive a graffiti coating, which makes it easier to clean the graffiti off if anybody tries to put a graffiti on there. That's an anti-graffiti coating, not an actual graffiti coating.
Thank you for clarifying. Okay. We have another big picture schedule question. I'll send that to you, Chris. Why will the track reconstruction between Belmont and Newport Avenue take 3 years?
Mostly because we're going to continue to run service directly adjacent to the construction. So we can't just tear them all down and rebuild them. If we did that in a greenfield in the suburbs, it would take a lot less time. But basically what we do, and those of you that sort of watched us build Wilson can appreciate it. You know, we tend to clear an area for construction. In this case, we'll clear half of the tracks and run the trains on the others, reconstruct it, then move the trains over to the new section and reconstruct the other half. So that kind of incremental movement, that kind of situation where when you may have seen it out there as we've constructed the bypass, we have folks that stand up on the platforms that control the movement of the trains through there as the contractor is doing various crane lifts. That might seem like a minor thing, but if you replicate the amount of times we need to lift things either away from the tracks or onto the tracks, that kind of thing begins to make up some of the challenges that we have building next to an active electric railroad. So the reason for that length of time is that we're going to continue to provide service, and we're going to provide it in the safest way we possibly can and the swiftest way we possibly can. I think it will be an improvement over some of the earlier efforts that we've been able to make because of the signal system that we're investing in. But it is a day-to-day battle for the contractor in particular to figure out where exactly they can work. In many cases, their impacts are things that they build into their schedule, they build into their budget, and they're one reason why transit work is expensive and it takes a considerable amount of time. We are working to expedite it, and we're working, I think, as a team. COVID has brought us together in ways that have enabled us to find a lot of solutions where we didn't see them before. So I would say that's good.
Thanks, Chris. So that's taking us to 15 minutes. I will do one more question because I think it's very helpful. The last one I'll send to Tammy. How can I get information on service impacts?
So we already have a really great system of CTA about if you want to know what's going on with the red line, brown line, green, whatever line you ride, you go to transitchicago.com/alerts, and you can sign up for either text or email alerts about your route, whether it's a train route or specifically a specific bus route. So that's a good way to know, hey, if something's happening on the red line, is my station going to be closed? You can get alerts for that. If you are looking more for community impact alerts, like where construction, is my alley going to be closed? I encourage you to sign up for construction alerts. That is transitchicago.com/RPM alerts. That is a great way to get information sent to you about upcoming impacts to your community. And this information will be provided, it was provided at the beginning, and it will be provided again at the end of this presentation and is on our website as well.
All right, thanks, Tammy. And yes, we are going to provide that information. We're concluding our Q&A section right now. So if we could get the slide up with our final contact information, like Tammy was mentioning. Great, there it is. So here's our contact information one last time for people who'd like to stay informed on the project. Again, if your question was not answered tonight, we will have a full Q&A up on our website. Also, take a look at your inbox. Keep an eye on that because we're going to be sending the link to that Q&A, the presentation, and a brief survey for everyone who attended. So make sure and take a look out for that. But that concludes our meeting, everyone. Thank you so much for being here, taking some time to learn about the project. We're excited to be able to talk to you with it, even if we can't be in the same room, and we appreciate your time. Hope everyone has a great evening.